this How I Lead interview, we talk with Skylar Haws. And man, if you're a brand new young men leader, or you have maybe a new group in your ward, this would be one to definitely listen to or pass on to that group. Skylar has a great approach, a lot of experience working with young men, especially in the context of high adventure. Like, how do you create an experience that's just hard, but not too hard, right? Because we don't want to overwhelm them, but doing something where at the end they can look back and think, wow, like, look what we did. That was so cool. And Skylar has some great ideas to do this, but more than just ideas, it's more of like, how do you warm the young men up to this? Or even their parents, right? How do you get the parents on board for do some of these more intense type of activities where, of course, safety is considered and everything's in place and done appropriately, but really pushing the boys to create some memories and some experiences that they'll look back and also have faith development, transformational experiences. So you're going to really appreciate this conversation with Skylar, and let's jump into it. All right, Skylar. So we have a studio audience here listening in. We'll get to some of their questions, but you reached out to me via email with a simple suggestion of maybe coming on the podcast and chatting. Maybe what led to that?
So I was listening to, because I'd recently just got back from a high adventure and was just kind of popping around on podcasts. I started with the Follow Him podcast, and then I was like, there was a few like suggested podcasts, and I hopped onto one. I can't remember what the name of that one was, and that led me here. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And so I just started going through some of the episodes, specifically looking at the ones that dealt with youth. And on there, there was one that talked about high adventure. And I was like, I'd love to hear somebody else's perspective on it. So I just listened to it, and I thought, hey, this guy has some really good ideas. And I loved it. And so I said, I think, and on there, I think there's some encouragement from that, from his story where he just volunteered for his, his calling. And I was like, maybe I should do that. I have something to share. I've been working with youth for quite a while. I think I have something to share that might be of value to somebody. So I thought I'd reach out and see if that was something that you'd be interested in.
Cool. So how long have you been serving with the youth?
So my first youth calling was back in 2011. And I've been, with the exception of the COVID years, which I think maybe it was a good thing I missed COVID years, but with the exception of COVID years, I've been pretty much working with the youth the whole entire time since then.
Awesome. Really cool.
Yeah.
And we were talking before that it's just sort of, you feel like, this is, if you were to pick a calling, this would be it, right?
Yeah. I've been in my dream calling for quite a while, and not that I wouldn't love any calling I got, but I'm really happy where I'm at. Just for those listening, I've served as a youth Sunday school teacher, young men's president back when we had those, priest quorum advisor many times, and early morning seminaries teacher as well, when I was going to school back in Pennsylvania. So
awesome, really cool.
Yeah.
And what's your current the makeup of your young men's organization? And because you're in Saratoga Springs,
Saratoga Springs, right? Yeah. So we have 40, I think about 40 young men total in the youth program. 12 of those are priests, I'm a priest quorum advisor, so I work with the priests. But in many wards, the priests and teachers kind of hang out together, and then we have about 15 or so. Well, no, maybe it's about another 10 or so teachers, and then we have like a ton of deacons, right?
Yeah,
that's a huge amount of deacons.
And where's a good, if you were to go back in time and talk to yourself on day one, or talk to a brand new priest quorum advisor, or someone just getting called in to serve with the youth, where's a good first piece of advice that you would offer?
Yeah, well, for me specifically, it would be very much just love them and enjoy them where they're at. Don't try to make them fit into any kind of mold. I did that when I first got called as a young men's president. I was working with these priests, and there was this one kid. He's a great kid, just really good kid. In fact, I saw him maybe a couple of years ago now, and I see him every once in a while. He still follows me on the socials, but but yeah, he just didn't like my approach, right? I was very much trying to get him to be like, hey man, like, not that anything I was trying to get him to do was bad. It was very, very good, but the way I was doing it, just because I wanted him to do things a certain way. It's like, no, you got to do it this way. You got to do it this way. And really, that's not a great way to work with youth. Best way that I found to work with youth is you meet them where they're at. You love them to death. You know, you just want to be with them and hang with them and do stuff with them and help them in any way you can, and then present options, right? Say, hey, this is what a youth does. This is what an extraordinary youth does, and you do those two things, right? And magically the Spirit works in them, and they start making those, you know, making those decisions, as long as you have that relationship with them, right? The relationship is number one. And so if I was to go back, that's definitely something that I would tell myself, my younger self, hey, focus on this. Don't worry about all this other stuff, because yeah, they're knuckleheads, man. So are you. Just remember that.
Right. Yeah. So I'm curious, just with your, like you mentioned this kid in your current group that, you know, is focused on Legos and, you know,
Yeah.
maybe is atypical. Like, how do you go about that as far as meeting him where he's at?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, really, once again, the kid's so great. He's fantastic, and he'll come up and he'll just start talking to me about whatever, and it's you know, giving him the appropriate attention,
Hmm.
you know, and just listening to him, and then where I need to try and redirect him a little bit, trying to redirect it back to Christ and focusing it back on Christ, and just having those conversations that, you know, rather than just dismissing them or things like that. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's like, okay, we have to move on, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we have to go on. So we have to actually stop him and just be straight with him. It's like, oh, thank you for sharing your thoughts. We're gonna move on now. And just, you know, and then change, you know, change kind of the trajectory. And he typically goes along with it, you know, no issue. But just being, you know, that's how I work with him. And sometimes it can be hard, especially in activities when, you know, he wants to do something else. But it's a good opportunity for the other boys who are not like that, to get exposure to that and remind them, like, hey, Christ is like, you know, Christ was, you know, he loved the children. He loved, you know, these people that had these special, you know, special needs. They weren't whole, right? And he loved them, and he was with them, and he did things for them. It's opportunity to serve, and an opportunity for those kids to also remember that. And sometimes I have to work with those kids to remind them of that, because sometimes some of them can get impatient, or they, you know, because they want to go out and they just want to, you know, they want to hit, like, they want to have a home run derby. This kid's not going to excel at a home run derby. He's going to excel at, like, hey, let's make a YouTube video, right? He
Mm-hmm.
thinks that's cool, right? And so trying to, you know, trying to switch things up and trying to help them think of others, as well, kind of helps the whole quorum become a little more unified, and you know, and we're still working on it, right? We're all work in progress. We're all
Yeah.
work in progress. So
Yeah. Your first principle here, the power of sacrifice in youth leadership. Where's a good place to?
I think the biggest part, you know, the biggest part of that, anybody who's gone on a high adventure for sure, but let me talk a little bit about back in February, my job outsourced my position, and so I had to, so I you know, and I had some runway, so which was fine, but they outsourced my position, so I didn't have a job. And I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do? And I felt very prompted to, hey, I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to take the things that I've been doing, and I'm going to just go with it, right? And so I'm reading books and I'm trying to figure out all these things, having lots of conversations. And the biggest thing is, I sat down and I prayed and I said, Heavenly Father, what, you know, I need something. What do I do? And the Lord's answer to me was very clear. It was, you need to go serve. Go serve. Now, it's not going to be this way for everybody, but for me, it was go serve. And I said, how does that have to do with anything about feeding my family, paying my bills, and all that stuff? And he said, go serve. And so I put myself all in, right? And I sacrificed time. I sacrificed, that time when I maybe could have been working on some sort of project or making some sort of connection or something. And I took the opportunity to serve in my calling, serve the youth. So I've been to youth conference. I've been to, I put together high adventure camp. And then I just got back from girls camp just a couple days ago. And magically I was on a hike at High Adventure, the only place we had service, and I get this text message like, hey, that contract we were talking about, let's move forward with it. And I'm like, cool, right? And just things have fallen into place, right? And so I understand that it's hard and it's a time commitment when you're working with youth. It's hard to do. But I also know that when you put your best effort, the Lord will make up the rest. If you have that faith, the Lord will take care of the rest, whether it's your family, your work, whatever, right? Whatever situation you're in, he's very aware of you and knows you. He knows me. And if he knows me, he knows you. So I'm nobody super special.
So jump into just the dynamics of High Adventure and, as far as creating that spiritual impact there, how you go about that.
So the first High Adventure, or the second High Adventure I went on, it was in this ward in Pleasant Grove, and it was really, really cool. And I've had, and to answer the question, I guess directly is I've had some really good mentors that have helped me see how to do that. And it's always going to be connect it back to Christ, whatever you're doing, right? Connect it back to Christ, and you can, you'll be amazed at what the youth come up with. So went on a bike ride. It was a 300-mile bike ride. We went from Pleasant Grove all the way down to Lake Powell. Did it over a 4-day period. Super fun, extremely difficult. And then at the end, what was hilarious is you get to Lake Powell, what do? You go into the water, get into the boat and everything. No, we did not do that. We got to Lake Powell. We stood on the shore for maybe an hour, played around in the water a little bit, and everybody's like, all right, let's go home. Like, we didn't even boat or anything. We didn't even stay the other night. We just came home a whole day early, and the boys wanted to. And so we
drove home. Is that right?
We did. We drove home. Yeah, we drove home. So we drove home, and then we set up all of that night's dinner and everything in the backyard of one of the Bishop Brick's house, and we all just sat in a circle. And the bishop asked this one simple question: why did we do this? Why did we do this? Why do we do this? Mm-hmm. And the boys just started bearing their testimonies about every part of the bike ride. It's like, well, I was really, really tired and done. And then, brother so-and-so came up and he rode with me and we talked, and it gave me the energy. And that's like, what Jesus does. And he, and I can do that throughout my life. And here's how I can use it. And it's really, really cool to watch them do that. And then fast forward many, many years later, see a post on Facebook about Father's Day. And this one kid in the ward that his family life was not great. But he was on that bike ride, and he posts 12 years later about fathers in his life. And he posts a bunch of pictures from that bike ride. And talking about those people in his life that helped him. Um, it's just really, really cool. You just connect it back to Christ and ask them, how does this connect back to Christ? And they will make connections. They will do it. They'll think about it, and it can become a game almost, right? Because now it's like, okay, how do I do that, right? How does boating tie back to Jesus? How does riding a bike tie back to Jesus? Um, so there's those kind of opportunities. I do believe in doing hard things as well.
Yeah.
So
That's
last year,
that's ambitious. 300 miles.
three,
I mean, I remember doing a 30-mile bike ride as a young scout, and that
it,
was
it
like
requires
intense.
it requires some prep, man. You can't just hop on a bike and go,
Yeah.
right? But that in itself um has its own kind of gospel learning, right?
Yeah.
Gospel metaphor there, in the preparation, which is great. And so whenever I do anything, I try and put at least one activity in there that's going to require us to do some physical preparation.
Yeah. Let me ask, as far as like this experience of like planning some of these high adventure and young men's camp and things, what is that process of doing that, as far as identifying activities or the boys' involvement? Like, what's the general process that you seem to go through now?
I start talking to the boys typically, September, October timeframe, and start laying down some ideas, some potential ideas. And I like to throw some crazy stuff out there, right? Hey, let's hike. Like one of them was, hey, let's hike, or let's summit the three highest peaks in Utah. Not highest, but like with the most like altitude gain. Like,
Mhm.
let's do that. I mean, they're all over the place. So one's in southern Utah, one's way out west in northern Utah, and then you got Kings Peak, in on the other side of northern Utah. Anyway, and so I start throwing those ideas out there just so that they can start getting a feel for what is possible. Um, and then if it's one that I think would be really, really great, I kind of push for it a little bit, and I start to talk to some of the boys that have influence with the other boys, and I'm like, hey, this would be really cool. And I kind of like push for that one, and then we come together and we do a planning session. And honestly, my planning sessions aren't like this one was kind of fun because we did pizza.
Mm.
Like we made pizzas, and then we talked about what do we want to do for high adventure, and we kind of put stuff together. Then all of these different ideas, and they kind of come together, and one starts to kind of coalesce, and we start figuring that out. And then after we kind of have some sort of an idea of here's some of the activities we want to do, then we'll get to the presidency, and we'll bring the presidency in. So we'll bring if the bishop can come, we'll have the bishop there. But if not, then it'll be the assistants, and then the teachers quorum presidency will come if we're doing it together. If we have the deacons quorum involved, because we've done that before as well, where we had deacons involved, and we'll have them as well. And we get as many leaders as possible. We get those presidency members, because ultimately they're the ones with the keys. And we just start talking about and solidifying an idea and seeing what starts to feel good. And once we have something where it's like, hey, this feels good, it makes sense, we kind of plan it out, see what we can do based on where we're at, and what, from a timing perspective, what do we have to kind of throw out or choose between. And then we come back again and we start talking about that. And so we have a few meetings in consecutive weeks to kind of get that hammered out. And then once we have a good fleshed out plan and understand here's all the activities that we need to do in order to prep for that, and then here's the activities that we're going to do on the actual camp, this is where we're going to be, then we take it and put it together, and we take it to the parents, and we say, here's the weeks that we're thinking of, here's the activities that we're doing, here's the safety measures that we have in place to ensure your boys are safe and okay. And yeah, and then we just, we lay that out and we get the parent feedback. And some will be like, we can't make it that week. Others are like, no way we're going to that. Others are like, okay, great. Why am I here? So we have like all that spectrum.
Yeah.
Very opinionated to good. Take my kid, please. Let
Yeah.
let him out of the house for a week, please. Get him
Yeah.
away from that screen.
So you do get some parents that just sort of opt out of like, we're busy that week, or we don't really want to do that, and
yeah. So we've had parents that are like, I'm really concerned about that activity. I mean, this year we had a parent really concerned because we'd planned we're gonna do a downhill mountain bike so we stayed up up American Fork Canyon, and up there we're going to be way up at the top of the mountain. We're going to do downhill mountain biking to the Provo River. We're going to float the Provo River, and then we're going to go ride. We'll drive up to the beginning of the trail for Timpanogos, and then we're going to hike up. We're going to camp in the meadow, and then do a sunrise hike the following day up to the
wow.
peak. And we had a parent that was like, yeah, that's way too much. There's no way that you got, that I'm going to have my kid go on that. And so we talked about it as a presidency, and the presidency ultimately was like, you know what? Yeah, let's not do that. Let's switch it up. And so we did, right? Now, do I think that they could do it? Yeah. Do I think it's going to be hard? Yeah, it's going to be hard. It would be a whole heck of a lot of fun. We still had a good time. We're still able to connect it back to Christ. It really, at the end of the day, that was my opinion, and not necessary.
Yeah.
But I'm going to push these boys, because I think that as you push them, they find the miracles, and they connect with Christ. And I have a great story about where even I was a little scared, but yeah.
Yeah. That's the sweet spot, right? When you get a little bit nervous on the experience, then that's the sweet spot, right?
You got it.
And that's interesting. Just with sort of this encouragement to let the boys lead and do the thing. And sometimes there's all sorts of content in the Leading Saints community about this, about, overstepping our influence there or not helping enough. And where's the nice balance there? Because you don't want to turn over too much of the ideation or the planning, or because then maybe they'll go a little too soft, right? And it's in these experiences that are a little bit difficult where some great development and transformation can happen, right? And so I can tell, like, in this, you're always sort of trying to push the envelope and encourage them and challenge them, and because that's where a lot of transformation will happen.
Yeah, exactly. And it does, right? I've seen it. So I talk about, I did a 300-mile bike ride. That one was that ward had been doing that 300-mile bike ride for every 4 years for 20 years straight. And so I wasn't going to be messing with that. But I took that same idea and I took it to a ward in Texas. And I talked to some of the boys and got them hyped, and they were all about, like, yeah, this is going to be epic. Like, we're going to have stories to tell. This is like, nobody's going to do this. I'm going to be extraordinary, because honestly, all of us want to be extraordinary and different, especially like teenage boys. They want to be unique. Yeah. And they want to do unique things. And so you want to try and convince them to do something that's hard. Just focus on all of the stuff that's like, hey, look at how cool this is. And then, by the way, this is going to be hard, but look at how cool this is. And they're like, yeah, I want to do that. But anyway, I did it with them, and they owned it, man. They owned it. Those boys, they showed up. I said, okay, we're going to do Saturday rides every Saturday from this time till June when we leave. We're going to increase. And by golly, those guys, 70% of them showed up every single week. Every single week, at least 70% of them were showing up for those rides. And we would ride and get longer and longer and longer. And by the time we got to the actual ride, it was like, yeah, we're going to do this, no big deal. They're all prepped. They're ready physically. I knew that everybody can make it. And they killed it, but that preparation was key. It was so key, but that was really cool because they owned it, right? They owned it. It wasn't me pushing them. It was just me giving them an opportunity. Said, okay, I'll be writing every single week. This is the time we're meeting. Anybody who's going to join me, like, this is what we're going to do. And so we did. And the only time I would make an announcement is if for whatever reason, hey, we have a holiday on that Saturday, we're not going to do it that particular Saturday, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going on a ride and we're meeting in my house at this time.
Yeah.
So,
And that's in addition to the typical weekly activity that you're having.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, do you find, I mean, I bet some are, have busy lives. It's maybe the preparation isn't as easy. And then when the day comes, they're not as physically prepared to do it, or.
Yeah, it's true. And so, in this so for the bike rides, we prepare for that. We have cars that kind of leapfrog each other so that the boys
Yeah.
can go from from one point to another point. And if they're like, hey, I'm done, I need a rest, they can hop in a truck, right?
Oh,
And
okay.
they can go. This last year, I was really worried about our hike up temp because I knew some boys, they weren't they just wouldn't be able to make it. So what we did was we had we had a coach, a nutrition and physical, like a physical coach come in that said, okay, here's your work, and he gave us workouts. He said, here's your workouts that you need to do, and here's the diets that you guys need to be on in order to prep for this. And so we did stuff like that, and then we went on hikes to prepare. So, and the hikes got progressively longer each hike to kind of help them get acclimated. Now, once again, not everybody showed up, not everybody came. And so what we planned on top of that is, from a safety perspective, I said, okay, I need to have, 6 leaders on this hike. Okay. And the 6 leaders were so that if one boy decides I'm out, right? Because a hike is one of those things where it's like you can't get in a car, right? Either somebody's going to come pick you up in a helicopter or something like that, or but more likely than anything, you're walking out, right? Going on the hike is optional. Hiking out is mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had essentially, in my mind, I had 3 groups. So 6 leaders and 3 groups of boys. At any given point, if the boys are like, I can't go any further, it's like, okay, cool. 2 leaders and either the one boy or multiple boys turn around and go back, and the rest of us can continue onward. And then once again, something else happens. I'm done, which happened, right? We got up to the meadow, and there was a big, huge group that were like, I can't go any further. And there was a smaller group, 1 boy and the 2 leaders that went up. We made it up to the saddle before it was getting too dark, before we were saying, hey, we're not going to go up any further just for safety reasons. But then we came back. And so you plan for that kind of stuff in advance. What's cool though, what's the coolest part is that it doesn't matter if they make it to the end or not, right? There is, once again, a huge metaphor of we can do all we can, and each one of us is going to give our all, and our all might be 2 miles into the hike. Our all might be 5 miles into the hike. Our all might be the whole entire hike. But no matter what, our all is our all, and Christ can make up the difference, right? And that's something that we can talk to the boys about. It's like, you can be proud of everything you gave because you gave all you could. And so, the actual activity doesn't necessarily matter. Once again, it's pointing them back to Christ that I found the most success. And then it also makes it less of a letdown if something doesn't go according to plan, because it's like, there's a great opportunity to teach these boys what happens when things don't work.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be like 90% of life. You're going to have to pivot, right?
Yep. Awesome. And and so it sounds like, I mean, I appreciate just pushing for these really hard things. And then as you're doing these things, looking for those lessons, the life lessons, the gospel lessons that kind of orient them to Christ, right? Is there anything
Yeah.
else about just your overall approach to high adventure that would be worth mentioning that we haven't touched on?
Just that once again, like the activities, if the boys decide, hey, they want to have a movie night or a video game night or whatever
Mm-hmm.
up at High Adventure, cool, man, great. Um, I think that having a whole host of activities, right? I personally love the really hard ones, right? Personally, me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm pushing for the bike ride every single year. I'm telling the
Oh
boys,
yeah.
I'm like, one of these years, I'm gonna get you guys. You guys are gonna be like, yeah, let's do the bike ride. Um, but if they don't choose that, that's fine, right? This last year we went boating, we floated the Provo River, and we hiked Timp. Um, those three activities, and that was it. That was all we really did. And then the rest of the times we played games. We had movie nights where we watched these movies up on the side of our trailer. I pulled out the projector and we had a little battery powered thing we could plug it into, and we watched, downloaded a movie off of my or onto my phone, and let them go to town, and just had a good time watching that movie up in the wilderness, and then we played games for a lot of it, and just being there, right, and hitting
Mm-hmm.
all of those different aspects of we did temple and service. Sorry, that was the other thing that we did. That's another cool thing, and let me tell you about that. But anyway, just kind of having those variety of activities is also a really good way, because Jesus grew in stature, in mind, and the scripture that they use for the youth program, right? All the different pillars. If we hit all of those different pillars.
Yeah.
Another thing that I would recommend is make it a kind of a production. Okay, I know this sounds kind of weird, but make it a little bit of a production, little thematic, dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so this year the presidency, because we were going to do some service, and I said, hey, it would be really cool to get prepared for this service if we asked for if we started looking or asking in our prayers for opportunities to serve, because our service activity was, we're going to pray at a park, and then we're just going to walk around a neighborhood, and we're going to knock on doors, and we're going to find somebody to serve. And I've done this 2 or 3 times now, and every single time, actually 3 times, I've done it 3 times. Every single time, miracles happen without a doubt. Without a doubt. They pray, and they just go around knocking on doors, and they find people who needed our service right at that moment. And it's been really cool. So, yeah, there's an idea for anybody who's out there. It's a
Yeah.
really cool idea, but making a little, thematic, maybe a little dramatic and stuff. We also did, like, I got plates, brass plates, and I had the stake presidency, the bishop brick. We had a changeover of bishop bricks, so we had two different bishop bricks in there, and all the leaders write our testimonies in these brass plates. And I went up on this hike that we did. It was almost like a little faith walk, and I buried these plates in the ground, put a little box in the ground, like a stone, like made it out of stones or rocks or whatever was up there, and buried it, and then put a rock around it, just like, kind of like a Joseph Smith type
Yeah.
experience. And then we did an orienteering course, and each part of that built on itself, to where at the end, they went on this treasure hunt, and they found the treasure, and the treasure were those testimonies. And it was such a cool experience, when you put in that little extra effort, right? That
Yeah.
little extra effort makes a huge difference, because we had a boy up there that he needs, he's struggling, but his testimony was like, he was very vulnerable, and he shared some really cool emotions up there,
Mm-hmm.
as part of that, right? Because it built up to it. Anyway, it was really cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, put that little extra effort in. That's the only thing I guess
That's
I would
cool.
add.
Yeah, and those are the moments you're praying for, right? And it's hard to
Yeah.
manufacture them, but again,
Yeah.
you can be as intentional as possible, and hopefully that happens. Um, Let's see. Richard asked the following. He says, with the priest-age boys being so busy with school, sports, and work, how do you handle when only 2 or 3 boys show up, especially when you're planning big activities? Any
Oh,
thoughts coming up?
man, yeah, yeah. Deal with the same thing. So how do I handle it? So we just plow forward. We keep going.
Yeah.
We don't give up. We just keep, we keep going. Um, and if they're, if they're with, we have some boys that are really into sports, some guys that, yeah, they're, they are doing school. Maybe some of them are doing school at night or whatever, they work. Yeah, it can be hard. But you try your hardest to get them. You plan these activities, and then you work with these boys one-on-one. It's more about the relationship. So this last year I had two young men, that great kids, but they're like, oh, I got football, I got football, I got football. And I'm like, but do you have football really? I mean, I know you have football, but do you have to be there? Or are you choosing to be there over this? And so I went over to their house and I just knocked on their door. And it was the night before youth conference. And I was like, hey, you guys coming to youth conference? You gonna come to youth conference tomorrow? And they're like, oh, I got football. And then I literally spent an hour and a half at night. It's like 9 o'clock at night when I knock on the door. It's 10:30 before I get home, and I have to get up at like 4 in the morning, right? Anyway, and I knock on this door, and then he starts talking to me, and this young man starts talking to me, and then he invites me into his house, and I walk into his house, and then he calls the guy that's across the street, by the way, and he's FaceTiming him, and he's talking to him, and then we go downstairs, and over time, they're like warming up to this idea, and we're talking about all kinds of stuff. Like, we first start talking about youth conference, and then we started talking about football, and then we started talking about girls. I mean, I made a whole entire trip around their world, of what's going on. I ended up, this kid grabbed a mango out of his kitchen, and then he's like, hey, let's go talk to the other kid. So we would go across the street and we knock on his door. Even though he told us don't come over, like, we knock on his door anyways, because that's how this one kid is. He's just like, I'm gonna do it. So he goes, and we're talking about, once again, we're talking about baseball, and we're talking about all this stuff, nothing to do with youth conference. And then by the end of that hour and a half, they're like, okay, we'll go. Like,
nice. Yeah.
Great, cool. So literally just I mean, it can be kind of hard, I know, but they need a balance in their life, right? And push for that balance. Ultimately, it's their decision, but the relationship that you have with them is really, really important.
Yeah.
And it's not about the numbers. I remember doing activities as a youth, and I was the only one that showed up. We had one, and this wouldn't fly today, but I had my leader and myself, and we would go and just talk. We'd run over to a store, we'd sit down, get an ice cream, and just chat, right? And just talk about life. But that relationship is really, really important. So that's what I would recommend.
And I appreciate that concept of just recognizing that these often sound like really valid excuses, and they're not like smoke screens. Like, they're not just saying it to say it because they don't really want to go. But when you really engage with them and try and push through those, it's encouraging, and it's amazing how they'll shift and say, you know what, maybe I can make time for that, Yeah. So, cool. Awesome. Any other point, principle, concept you want to make sure we include before we wrap up, or how do we do, Skyler?
Yeah. So, over time, there's a couple things. Sometimes it's really, really hard. We're like, I'm going to go back to this balancing callings with work and family. There's been times where, especially when my kids were younger, that I would just bring them to the activity with me sometimes, depending on what we would do. And sometimes they would play just off by themselves. Other times they would get a little more involved. And the kids would love it, right? There's there's always an opportunity to teach, um, and to teach these boys what it is to be a man, right? And to be a responsible father, because that's what they're going to be. They're going to be fathers. They're going to be men, right? And you are the example to them. And so sometimes including your family in that, right? Whether it's your wife or whether it's your kids, like that's not a
Mm.
bad thing. Um, and so, sometimes that balance is, yeah, my wife needs a break from the kids. So, and I have young men's tonight, I'm bringing them with me. Sometimes that happens. Not so much now because my kids are older, but back, when they were smaller, like they would come to me come with me to activities. Um, so, but making the sacrifice sometimes as well, that's huge, right?
Yeah.
That's huge. I guess the other thing I would add is, once again, I'm going to reiterate this point. There's no such thing as a bad activity or a bad experience. It's all about perspective. So a couple of years ago, we did, not this last year, but the year before, I took these boys on a bike ride. It was a 20-mile bike ride, nothing crazy. We were in the
No,
desert.
that's still crazy to me.
um, but yeah, we were on this bike ride, and I was like, "Hey, everybody needs." I think I said 3 or 4 liters of water. Everybody bring that. One kid got on the ride. I don't know how. He got on with a life straw and nothing else. The rest of them like blew through their 4 liters of water within 7 miles of this 20-mile ride, and I'm like, what the heck, So we get some more water and stuff. We're able to catch somebody because we're in the desert. Finding water in the desert is difficult. Anyway, so we are now going off. We get refilled with water and we're going off, and all of a sudden it starts to get a little hotter, and some of these kids are starting to drag. The gap between, who's up front and who's in the back is now getting longer and longer as some of these kids are hacking it. One kid somewhere in the middle, and I'm going back and forth trying to make sure everybody's good. All the leaders are, good. Anyway, and this one kid gets early onset heat stroke.
Wow.
And that's when it gets scary. Because then it's like, okay, now this is a serious situation. We need to reconvene. And so I ride up to the front, get all the boys up front. Hey, we got to turn around. We got to go back. And then others, okay, we're all in one spot. We find this little cave so we can just hang out in the shade. We had somebody go and try and get some more water. So a couple guys go off, and we're all hanging out here. Now I know I took a class I became a wilderness first responder because I loves being outside, and I want to make sure that when I'm outside with the boys that I'm I can take care of them at least,
Mm.
if something serious like this happens. And so I know that we have a little bit of time. We're okay. We have water. We're sharing. We're going to consume that slowly. Somebody's going off and getting help. We're not too far away from a road, but we're just waiting out the heat of the day because of this situation. And we're all resting and just hanging out together. And there are some of the younger boys that were really, really scared. They were really scared. And we had to keep saying, hey, we're okay. We're good. Everything's fine. Like, we're good, and just trying we started trying to sing hymns. We had a bunch of prayers. We had, we were talking about just a lot of different things. And some of the boys, they deal with stressful situations with anger, and some of the boys are like, they break down and they cry. And so having those two, especially when they're brothers, that was a fun dynamic to try and manage. Anyway, and so what ends up happening is, the boys pray and we say, okay, if we don't have anybody coming back by this time, then we're going to start heading back ourselves. Like, gives us enough rest. We're okay. We can make our water last that long. We're all right. Everything will be okay, kind of thing. Anyway, and so we pray, and it's like, hey, what do you guys feel? Put it back on them. who feels like we need to do this, and they're like, okay, we need to leave. Okay, great, let's leave. Literally, we get on our bikes, we turn the corner, and there's this leader coming back, full things of water, and everybody's like, good, and now we're we're heading back. But one of the things that I was able to quote to them was President Monson quoting Ella Wheeler Wilcox, and he said essentially, it's easy enough to be pleasant when everything flows by like a song, but the man worthwhile is the one that will smile when everything goes dead wrong. And tying that all back, and seeing all of those, pointing out, like, look at how God blessed us throughout this whole entire experience, right? Yeah, everything fell apart. Bad things happened. We did not want to be in that situation, but look at the way God blessed us. He loves us, right? And all of a sudden, now they can take that, what could be a negative experience, and make it positive, right? So always making that connection back to Christ. So important, because it doesn't matter what activities we do, and if they fall apart or not, we can always kind of turn it around and be like, hey, look at how that relates back to Christ. So
love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, last question I have for you, as you reflect on your time just leading in this fashion with the young men, how has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
Oh, that's such a good question. So as I've sacrificed my time and my talents and my effort, and I've lived the temple covenants that I've made, I've seen sometimes in real time God's blessings and His love in my life. And as I've felt that, and as I've seen that, it just makes me want to do better and continue to get better and continue to love others and be a better, ministering brother, being a better brother, being a better son, being a better father, and really kind of become the man that God wants me to become, which is like Him. And so I've, as I've done that, I've seen His hand in my life, and it's just made me want to do more, right? Do more, give more, be more.